Balasubramanian, the founder of GRAM and the author of GRAM's SSC report, the research report, to share about what is in it for NGOs, how and why and how a social stock exchange and its impact. Over to Dr. Balasubramanian.
Thank you, Basaraj, and it's a pleasure to be among such distinguished people. So all my co-panelists, co-speaker Jagadanji, Satyakji, Raviji, Deepamala, and Udayji from Vishwa Kendra. It's like my previous speaker mentioned. I think it's a momentous time for us to stop, pause, and recalibrate. A lot of things are changing. The COVID crisis is essentially, I see it as an opportunity, because for too long I've been talking about it as a crisis. But essentially, it's possibly a wonderful opportunity for us to use this time to reflect. And luckily for us, I think a lot of changes are happening in the country, and the NGO sector cannot be left behind. And we need to possibly articulate our needs. Sometimes I would even mention our existential threats, communicate it to the policymakers in a manner in which they understand that we are collaborators, and we are able to bring about meaningful change for society. And that's the intent. Now, we strongly at GRAM and my personal convictions believe in partnerships and looking at how do we work with everybody, work with other CSO partners. I also don't believe in using the word NGO, not as a fashion statement, but basically because I don't like to define ourselves as not something else. So I'd like to say what we are rather than what we are not. I think we are critical components in the development spectrum. As much as government is a principal motivator, the catalyst, the change maker, initiator, but government alone cannot do everything. Increasingly, we're noticing it. Civil society organizations, communities whose voices need to be heard, and now post CSR, post 91 itself, the change in the way the law policies of the corporate world is operated, I think they're also some significant players. I also believe there are two other players, and I'm glad a lot of academicians have joined. I think the academia and the media, both positively and negatively, can impact and influence social development by shifting the narratives of change itself. So in this context, we got to see the social stock exchange from the context of the announcement of the finance minister. And I would like to quote a statement, not the exact words, but the intent of her words. So we say governments must be judged based on two things. In the world of policy in which I belong, when you do a policy analysis, we say look at the intent of the government and look at the actions that flow from that said intent, from the stated intent. The government's intent comes from policy announcements, and the finance minister's announcement is a policy statement in which she's clearly said she recognized the contributions of the civil society groups, and for the want of a better word, I'll continue to use the word NGOs because that's what we are all familiar with in hearing, and that's what the budget document also quotes. The contributions are appreciated, and the concern is the finance minister was this sector might not be getting consistent and certain funding with certainty. And as an opportunity for the sector to ensure that they are able to meet one side the social obligation, at the same time tap into a new resource available, the announcement of the social stock exchange was made. And in July 2019, this announcement was I received it with mixed feelings. I would be very honest, because my research in this space of social business, social enterprise, and social stock exchange is close to more than 4 years now. And I had my own concerns. My concerns were founded on the simple fact of one question: are we as NGOs ready for a social stock exchange? The government is ready in offering it to us, but are we ready in taking it up, participating with all the intent that we deserve to show, and making sure that it continues to exist for the purpose that it was created? Second reason was, I thought as a nation, my research showed that India was ill-prepared for a social stock exchange. And so when we had the opportunity to sit and explain all this to her, and I thought her openness and her commitment to the cause, she suggested, why don't you suggest a roadmap which will help us prepare? So the announcement has been made, Parliament has approved it, that means India is going ahead with it. And so she said, why can't a roadmap be brought out which will tell the government or the system how exactly we can proceed? That is the context in which GRAM's report comes in. But that is on one side. The other thing why we really felt that the NGO sector needs to wake up is after SEBI's working group brought out this report, and I'll get into what is a stock exchange in a few minutes from now. Many of us are aware of it because a lot of people are talking about it, writing about it. They have their own views on it. Sometimes it's one-sided, sometimes it's fair, sometimes it's balanced, sometimes it's not. But the NGO voice and view is yet to be heard strongly. So the intent of this webinar is that there are at least 300 participants here, and we know more than 200 are NGOs. If we can all come together and explain our concerns to SEBI as well as to the government, we can constructively contribute, because that is what we are here for. And just to give an idea to the civil society organizations present here, in the working group constituted by SEBI, the sad fact is there's only one NGO representative. All 9 or 10 others were industry representatives. They were all from the industry, from the sector. They are all corporate entities, or they're all finance people who understand finance. Well, exchange needs all this. So we at GRAM realized the 3 buckets. One bucket is what we call the supply side bucket, where the money comes from, where the money gets applied from. And this is the world of investors. And the reason we need to understand all the 3 buckets as NGOs, because as much as we understand donor psyche, we got to understand there's the investor psyche. Investors don't just invest for, some of them might be outrightly for profits. Some of them might actually have a social conscience, their profits with some good social good. Some of them might simply say, I only want to see social impact. So they are also a variety of investors. Now that's one bucket. The second bucket is the central bucket, which is what SEBI understands very well, the stock exchange proper. Now, let's not forget, and I know a lot of my NGO friends have asked me this question. They have not asked me what is a social stock exchange. The question a lot of my NGO friends ask me, because that's a world we all live in. All of us NGOs live in that world. They ask me, what is a stock exchange? And it's right, because we're so much into working with people, with communities, with grassroots, we don't invest time on looking at the world of making money and exchanges and dividends and returns and all that. So we have failed to really understand the complexity of what a stock exchange is. And this the stock exchange is a place where an organization, a profit company, gets listed once it fulfills some basic norms of the exchange and can raise capital not only from primary promoters and investors, but can also have secondary trading, which means I can buy the shares of Reliance in the open market, or when they announce an initial public offering, keep it with me for some time, earn dividends on it based on my shareholding, or I may not get any dividends if there's a loss for the company. At some point, I can sell it also to somebody else, which means there's trading also. So exchange is not a portal. Many of us NGOs nowadays are used to a fundraising portal. It could be Give India Foundation or many of these portals that are there, where organizations like Rangade, which raises money on the public portals and then gives it to small SHGs, etc. So we are sort of used to it, but an exchange is much more than that, and we need to keep that in mind. The third box, and the box which all of us belong to, and several of us belong to, is the box called the demand side, where money is in demand. So we have our own DNA, and in this country, though we are all aggregated as an NGO, the tragedy is not a single law governs all of us. We have Yuvak Mandals, which can go to the youth office and register. We have non-profit organizations, technically, which can simply be a trust, or they can be an NGO registered to the Register of Societies, or now increasingly the Section 8 companies. And I think we should talk about this because there are close to 4,500 Section 8 companies, and many of them you may not even be aware what they're doing. And some of them are even accused by the state itself, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs itself, as vehicles for just shifting funds from the corporate to be parked into another system. So these are all kinds of challenges are there for us. So Jagdananji was so wonderful. In 3 slides, he captured the entire ecosystem. So it's very easy for me to build on that. So I'm going to start talking about what is a social stock exchange, how does it impact us, why is it good or why could it not be so good, what could be the things we could contribute, specifically why is the SEBI report not very NGO friendly, and what can we all do, because we still have 3 days time till the 15th of August to communicate our opinion to the SEBI organization to make sure that our voices are heard. So I'm going to just start with, let me share the screen. Give me a minute. Can you see the slides?
Not yet, sir.
Yes.
It's seen now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So technically, a social stock exchange in the broadest sense simply means enabling public money to be invested for public use. And let's be very clear. We generate money from the public sources and we want to put it back on people. But it's a platform that, let's not forget, it's a platform that matches investors. So the word here is investor, it's not a donor, or enterprises, or to enterprises or organizations with missions that align with theirs, with the investors' mission, in return for a social return on investment. But it does not exclude a financial return on investment. That means they're expecting a traditional ROI, financial ROI, but they also want a social ROI if they're really socially conscious. And the third thing that I really want to mention is my research shows at that time, now it's again a little changed, there are 14 social stock exchanges in the world. And many of them are at different stages of development. Only 5 or 6 of them can be even called something close to an exchange. You can call something a real exchange only when you permit trading, listing and trading. The only social stock exchange in the world which actually allows listing and trading, and that also does not allow secondary trading, is the Canadian Social Stock Exchange. So most of them are just private placements or crowdsourcing platforms. So we have to be very, very clear when we understand all this, because what is it that's going to happen in India is something that's really important. But look at it, look at all what we are all used to is traditional philanthropy. All of us need funds. And our problem is nobody can give us commitment like the next 10 years I will fund something. Now, development is a generational process. It cannot be driven by quarter to quarter thinking. No, I engage a lot with corporates, very good people. But the corporate DNA is to measure their performance on a quarter to quarter basis. They will tell you what is the quarter performance this quarter, what is the next COVID's impact in the first quarter, etc. And so they expect the same quarter to quarter performance when they fund you. Now, if a donor gives you money for running a school, after the first quarter, it will say, what is the impact of your educational program? Now, how do you communicate to him? The word impact as used by a NGO is a generational counting. It takes 15, 20 years to see the impact of education that we are given. The impact of coming to school every day, we can give a report card and say. Or we can say the child coming to school is attending all the classes. We can possibly go and say what are the learning outcomes at the next level, but to look at the impact of education. But I don't blame the corporate world because they are looking at production, manufacturing on a quarter to quarter basis. So there's a lot of translational loss, a lot of difficulty in communication. We got to be clear about it. So, impact investing, this is a fashion statement again. A lot of people use this word. I'm going to show you a slide soon, which actually gives the entire spectrum of how money moves into this world. Impact investing through a social stock exchange, what does it do? Is it democratizes development funding. It can offer it to a large number of people. A small to medium NGO, if it knows how to handle it and receive it, it can take it. A large NGO, which is what generally will happen in most countries, will take it. And then it also opens up opportunities to invest it responsibly, the 3 words, safely, through social organizations to a large number of people. So there is an opportunity. So we cannot criticize the social stock exchange only by looking at the SEBI report. I think we should look at the social stock exchange and see the good it can bring in if it is brought in properly. And that is why it's important we communicate this to the government to tell them that it is an exchange which needs to address the needs of NGOs as defined by the finance minister in a speech, and not protect the interest of the investor alone, which is what the SEBI report does. So we should also keep in mind, we cannot look at a social stock exchange as something which can replace NGO funding. Now, Jagdandhi pointed out 31 lakh, even if there are only 8 lakh, 10 lakh NGOs on the field, how many of them even can look at getting into the social stock exchange ecosystem? With Darpan, with all these, there's only 93,000 are there. And if you remove all the other things that Jagdandhi told, maybe only 60 or 70,000. Ravi will be a better judge from his role in the Niti Aayog. He can tell us exactly how many of them are real NGOs in that. It's such a challenge to get them onto the Darpan system itself. How much more challenging it will be for us to incentivize and welcome NGOs to become part of the social stock exchange. So we need to keep this in mind. If somebody is seeing the stock exchange as a replacement to traditional philanthropy, there's a disaster waiting to happen. It should be seen as a supplement and not to supplant NGO sector funding. So we got to look at this very carefully, and we should make sure that people are expecting returns. Let's not think that everybody is very egalitarian and saying, I'll just put money for doing good. Then you don't need an exchange. We have already existing mechanisms for donors to do that. So I believe, why do we need it today? And I see it from three different directions, three perspectives, all the three sectors. And this is an opportunity for us to allow the fourth sector, what I call the fourth sector, to emerge. I'll talk about it a little later. Now, the government all over the world, not just India, we are seeing a decline in public sector investments and budgets. Less and less money is actually flowing into the public sector for public sector activities. Post 2008 financial crisis across the world, most countries are talking about efficiencies. The government is changing its DNA and it is selling away its traditional things which it controlled. In the 40s to 50s, when the government started functioning in India, the government thought from making bread to running aeroplanes, it is their job, which half of it was not necessary, but that's how they looked at it. Today, the government thinks the people will do everything, markets will address a lot of responsibilities. Now, it's two ends of the argument, but I think somewhere in between, the fact is governments are also steadily the declining investment of government is something we need to keep in mind. Let's look at the social sector. The social sector is also understanding we cannot permanently depend on charitable giving, and we cannot be dependent on unpredictable funding, because you cannot go tell, we run a tribal school, we run a tribal hospital. I cannot tell a patient walking to the hospital, my funding stops, I will not take care of you anymore. We have an obligation. We have created a system where we are expected to be responsive to the needs of the community. Incrementally, we may get the communities to participate, but we cannot eliminate support to communities. So there's a process for this, and that's what takes time. And unpredictable funding throws everything into jeopardy. There are some estimates, Baswat spoke about Graham's report. There are other reports, some of them verified, some of them unverified, that close to 50 to 60% of NGOs as we know it might disappear in 2 years. The economic challenges continue. And that's a huge challenge. So we cannot, the sector is now understanding it can't depend. It needs to find new sources of money. It needs to find money which it can generate itself and plow it back into what it wants to do. Right? And look at the private sector. Corporates are changing. Corporates are understanding that the world is questioning them. And I think COVID is an excellent opportunity where people are questioning consumerist economies now. People are questioning about the impact on planet. People are talking a little more strongly about triple bottom lines. And so that means that sector is also, today, as I'm part of a larger global group, and we had 20 large NGOs corporate chiefs around the world. And from India, Anand Mahindra ji was represented in that, who released a letter about their commitment to society as a CEO of a big corporate entity post-COVID, which very clearly feels like an NGO letter. It doesn't feel like a corporate letter. That means things are changing. Let's accept it. So the corporates are becoming socially conscious. They're really wanting to look at, I'm not saying everybody, at least the shift is happening. And so we'll have to capitalize on it. They are looking at sustainable development interventions. They see good business in sustainability. So a lot of them are looking at sustainability also as a business option. And that's also we need to keep in mind. This is a slide I want to talk about a little deeper. So here I want to talk about, I don't know your right or my right, but the traditional philanthropy, which is what all of us are used to. We write a proposal, donations come, we know exactly what we're getting the money for, and the donor knows exactly why he's giving us the money, and we give a social return. And then over time, especially in the West, it went faster. In India, it's just evolving and maturing. People spoke about venture philanthropy. They said we want to provide capital to development ventures, and we may not have a profit expectation. I know Rangde and Ram and his wife Swati, they offer interest to the donor. Many of them don't take it. They put it back into the organization. Then they fund small micro enterprises to operate. The expectation is you can have a profit, but most of them don't take it. So that's venture philanthropy. Then it slowly evolved into socially responsible investing, where I believe in something and I find this organization working in that. I say I'll give it to you, but I want a social return, but I also want a financial return. It can be sub-market. All these companies talking about solar power, etc. All of them are for-profit entities. Many of them today are Section 8 companies, but they get people to invest, but they cannot give. Section 8 cannot give a return, but for-profit entities can give some return. Then evolution of impact investing came, and this is just starting in India. And their numbers are there in the Impact Investment Council's figures, but I believe that it's still a lot to go, a lot of maturation to happen, but there's a huge potential here. People want social return, but they also want on-par market financial returns. If the market is giving them 7 or 8% today or 10% today, they want 10% too, but they want to see social return. So they are not looking at you generating profits. They're looking at society getting the social benefit, but they should get their money back. Sustainable investing is clearly financial market driven, and is something which is evolving now. And the other end of the spectrum, if you're a corporate entity, it's fully commercial investing. We invest, we buy shares, we put money into a commercial investment, we get financial returns. I gave this because where does a social stock exchange position itself? Whose money does it take? Does it take traditional philanthropy money? Does it take commercial investing money? Or is it in between? So these are not just words. Each of us have their own processes, rules, regulations, etc. So Gram, like I explained, we studied it. Our intent was very clear, demand side of the ecosystem, where we are mission driven. We look at purpose over profits. We very clearly said it's not that we're against profits, but we want to see purpose. And we said, how do you create a social enterprise ecosystem as a precursor to set up a viable social stock exchange? You know, our fear was a social stock exchange gets set up now. People who don't know what is social, you know, there's a very important component. There are three components: social, stock, and an exchange. SEBI might understand stock and exchange, but will they understand social? I doubt it from the report. So if you're talking of a social stock exchange, tomorrow, let's say it doesn't work, it fails. And if it fails, a very important opportunity for NGOs to possibly seek resources might die. And 5-10 years later, somebody will come up and say, oh, that will not work. So we need to make sure that it works, not only because development can happen in this country, but we NGOs can be an integral part of the social development process. So this is what we tried doing. And what is it that we looked at we should have? So I want to give this some figures. Why is it important? Why do we even want to do this? India is a signatory to SDGs, the UN SDG. And if we have to meet the commitment, India is fairly committed. If you look at the Niti Aayog reports, the efforts of the Niti Aayog and SDG, etc., if you really have to meet the promises made to the United Nations, UNDP, we have to spend $1 trillion a year. And there is no, that kind of money doesn't exist for the sector. Today, government funding, Jagdananji showed a lot of numbers. I'm quoting UNDP numbers. UNDP's claims are, in India right now, we are spending $440 billion, everything put together. Government, civil society organizations, multilateral agencies, bilateral agencies, CSR funding, all of it together. Which means there is no other place where money is available except in the private sector. Let me give a small example. Recently, Reliance had an IPO or a sort of or an offering, not an IPO, but I think what do we call it, rights offering, a rights issue or something. And in 3 days, they could get a subscription of 60,000 crore rupees. I'm shocked. You know, as an NGO, we have to leave 200, 300 people, employees, because we couldn't afford to pay them salaries because of the COVID crisis. And at the same time in India, there's another private entity which is able to mobilize in 3 days 60,000 crores of public money, which means private sector has the ability. Now, culturally, civilizationally, India, whether I strongly believe that we have this ingrained into our civilizational culture. Our DNA is Dan and Seva. Dana and Seva is part of us. Philanthropy and service is part of a culture. Now, how much of it, and it is growing the last 10 years, it was growing a lot in retail, a lot of people are giving, but now things might change. And I strongly believe, not just I believe, in India also, the catalyst, prime promoter and overseer of social development is the government, and they have to continue, they have a continued role to play. There can be no other way vulnerable groups can be protected but by state intervention. And if states don't do their job, it is civil society organizations which can remind the state that it is their job. So let's not forget that. But there's also a fact that we don't have the capacity to operate at the intersection of philanthropy and finance. We are very good in philanthropy, maybe. Not all, but at least many of us are. But we may not be very good in finance. And when you intersect both of it, we don't have the talent, we don't have the knowledge bandwidth. So we have to build it. So we can talk about a social stock exchange, but are we ready for it? So this has already been mentioned, but in 2000, I'll just go by 4 years. Whatever reasons, systemic, structural, NGO are also, all NGOs are also not clean. A lot of black sheep in our community too. So we have had a fall in close to 40% of foreign contributions. That's significant. But the more important thing is, when Government of India has clearly mentioned, the Prime Minister has clearly mentioned, we're looking at Atmanirbhar and Make in India, I think it is our responsibility to say that these statements cannot be restricted to just the manufacturing sector or just to other sectors. I think we should demonstrate that we can actually make sure that we can rely on resources within this country, with innovative models within this country, to be self-reliant in every way possible in delivering qualitative programs which are innovative, by engaging a large number of people, and that's what social stock exchange can give us. So I believe a lot of younger generation people want to give, and we have a lot of opportunities there. what is the social enterprise? And this is my concern. So the SEBI report refuses to define a social enterprise. And I'm very nervous because you don't define the foundation, but you want to construct a big building, a building which is a castle in the air, but with no foundation. So that's a concern because even today in India, we don't have a legal definition for a social enterprise. You want to create an exchange for a social enterprise without defining it even. In India, everybody says I'm a social enterprise. Now today that's a fashion statement. Everybody wants to be a self-declared social enterprise. Most of them are either for-profit entities or they're at best a Section 8 company. There is only functional understanding of a social enterprise. There is no legal understanding. So we need to be extremely clear. The closest that comes to the definition of a social enterprise is an FPO, which is a little hybridized version. So we need a legal definition on which you have to build it. You'll be surprised that the 62 definition, the Graham report, all of you can download from the Graham website. I don't want to go through all that. The 62 definitions, and we are looking at what the Indian definition contain. So we are saying social logic should take precedence. There should be a balance without losing out the primary intent of social development. The SEBI report talks of a for-profit entity, non-for-profit entity, but I really don't understand how both of them can coexist and how a non-profit can give dividends. You know, the Indian laws don't permit it. All of you are aware that the Indian Income Tax Act will not permit you to receive more than 25% of your total resources as user charges or user fees. You have to have 75% of it from traditional philanthropy or donations. And if that is a system, how do you even pay somebody a dividend? So we have so many things to alter right now. So I believe we should see profits as a means to an end and not the other way around. So what are the challenges if you even create it today? The existing ones without any definition. They don't have a legal status. They have constrained access to finance. They don't have accountability frameworks. Because today they all look at finance first, that kind of thinking. At social first is what we need to look. We don't have customized policy support. Like we have MSME, a lot of support is there. There are tax incentive, tax concessions, social enterprises don't have. Other countries have this. There are different models. UK has got the community interest companies. The US has got several. It's got limited liability corporations. It's got B Corps. It's got several different variations of it. A lot of European countries have. South Korea has got. Thailand is now just getting one. The last 10 years they've been working with it. They just announced a stock exchange. So a lot of these are there. So without strengthening this, you cannot expect NGOs to get into the system. You will have not only define it, but you must give us a roadmap for NGOs to say, how do I transition into it if I want to? If I don't want to, I must still have a methodology to survive and flourish and grow and continue to do what I'm doing. But those who want to evolve into a hybrid must have a way forward, a clear way forward, which will allow them over a year or two with capacity building from the system to actually become a social enterprise. So there are a lot of these things we need to keep in mind. So what are we suggesting? We are suggesting that a definition should incorporate, you should have a separate vehicle, a separate defined legal entity called a social enterprise. We are calling it an Indian social enterprise. It should be a social logic over profit logic. Our social mission matters more. We are not saying don't make profits, but profits should be reinvested for the social cause. It should be means and not an end in itself. It could be legally registered for profit or a non-profit. Anybody can enter. There will be a lot of screening, due diligence, barriers to enter, which you have to negotiate and enter so that you can convince everybody that you are indeed a social enterprise. If you're going to self-declare, I give this example. A car company manufactures cars. The car company can come, if SEBI says you can self-declare, the car company will say, I'm a social enterprise. Why will they say that? They will say society has to move around. Society has to travel from point A to point B. So I'm creating a vehicle for them to move around. I'm doing it for society. So I'm a social enterprise. But is that definition acceptable is something we NGOs have to ask. So we have to look at all this model to incorporate. It should allow startups. It should allow existing businesses, existing NGOs also to migrate into this. So only then we can really do. So how do we do it? I think we should not rush into it. We are requesting that a three-level layer, a high-level committee, and all the countries that have done it have reasonably done this. UK is the closest model. A minister of corporate affairs, or somebody very senior in government, under his chairmanship or her chairmanship, the committee can exist, participated by the NITI Aayog, by all the stakeholders, CII, FICCI, NGO representatives. Together we come to a conclusion, what is a social enterprise? Try it out in a few places, pilot it, and then bring out a national legislation, because each state has got its own legislations for corporate. Though there's a company affairs law, states have their own sub things which they can operate with. So can you have a national legislation which incorporates all this and then take it out? So there are major elements for a social stock exchange. It is not just embedding it in some existing exchange. There's a demand side to be addressed, the NGO side, our side. The investor side, investors must be confident. You can't simply tell him you'll get returns. How does he get the returns? What is his pathway? Where is the assurance? Who guarantees the due diligence has been done on the NGO? The ethically, socially conscious investors, you need infrastructure and intermediaries. This can either be a standalone exchange or it can be embedded in existing exchange. You know, the social stock exchange might be a new concept to India. 2003 is when Brazil started it. It's the first country in the world to start it. 2009-10, United Nations started talking about it. And we have signed into it. And we have cells it in the Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange to do this already. So this is not new. Starting a new entity is not we should look for. We should look for a working entity. So we have to look at where it can operate, how it can operate, and why exchanges around the world are failing. The London Stock Exchange has a social stock exchange within it. When they started, only 11 people listed themselves. So why? Why aren't more people coming in there? So we need to look at leadership, which the government can provide, the regulatory frameworks that has to be done, and then we have to have a clear roadmap, a starting point. I believe a coordination committee embedded in the Niti Aayog being the policy body, representatives from all major organizations, do the preliminary research, create the demand side ecosystem, create the supply side ecosystem, give them the commitments you need, and then make it happen. What are the challenges we'll face? No? Let's understand, we operate out of passion. Let's not forget that. You cannot change the color overnight. And we have no choice also. If we decide not to change the color, we may not survive too. That's the reality today. So how do we make sure we don't lose the social intent that we're doing? We don't lose the accountability frameworks that we create. We don't lose the watchdog role that we play. We don't lose our own innovative designs that we operate. But we do it not because of profit intent. So how do we rechange our DNA to the extent where we can understand the intersection of finance and philanthropy? And we have a scaling up problem. You know, India's problems are huge. No single agency can come and tell, I have solved India's problem in. We can't, because that's a challenge. And if and all of us have innovations. The only problem for scaling up is finance. So if you're given the adequate finance to build capacity and teams, possibly we can do it. There's no certainty, there's no consistency. There's no talent assurance, because talent today is a market-driven talent scenario. Highest paying talent, most satisfying talent goes to different areas. How do we attract the best talent to our sector if you want to really make it professional? Right? We need to understand the world of finances, financial instruments. With all my research, I can confess I'm still yet to master it. There's so much to understand, it's so complex, and it's so difficult. Our existing laws will not allow us to transition today. Let's not run away from it. Our laws are suffocating. Our laws are not to enable. Our laws are always driven by suspicion. It is not driven by trust. So many things have to change. So how do we evolve into a hybrid? Or we can start a new, or should we as NGOs have two organizations? One is an NGO, one is our own social enterprise, so that we don't get confused. So these are questions we need to ask ourselves, which is better, which is bad. So I leave it here. I know there's a lot more I can keep talking about, but I've taken a lot more time than what was given to me. So I thank you all so much again for being here. And this is a time when we have to all get together. Gram is happy to share any information. The reports are on a public domain. My request to all the NGO friends here is, think about it. Go please look at the SEBI website, look at the SEBI report. There's also a form that you can download from the SEBI site and give your comments. Please give your comments to SEBI so that they understand our views. They understand that they are missing out of the social sector intent and views. And if that is there, I'm sure they will integrate it, and hopefully we'll have a good stock exchange which we can all use. Because stock exchange is going to happen whether you like it or not, I like it or not. But let's make sure that we make a good stock exchange happen. And that is where NGOs can come together and do it. Thank you so much again.
Pick those questions and surface you. I know you have taken a little more time, but I cannot withhold by asking this question, because this question is being actually going around in the NGO sector. There's a thought, like, should we exclude so non-profit organization until and unless this SSC proves itself or perform to the bare minimum level? Actually, that is one thing. Or should we separate the non-profit and for-profit enterprise exchanges separately? Keep it separate. Actually, that's one thing, because the whole the way each sector thinks and acts is completely different. As you said, you cannot change our colors overnight. So with this background, either you can choose to answer no or at the end. So over to you, Dr.
I may not remember the question, so I'll just quickly answer so that I know Jagadanji has also got a lot of questions to answer. The second question first, should we have a separate stock exchange? Personally, from my research, though it should be separate, it will not work, because we'll have to look at what is a stock exchange. A stock exchange is an entity which lists organizations, allows them to trade. So NGOs as they exist today cannot even be on the stock exchange. So let's not even talk of something of trying to put two things together which will not work. It's like trying to mix honey and water and saying that they will mix perfectly. It will not. It may look it's perfect, but it is not. So I believe that if you're setting up a social stock exchange, create a new vehicle called a social enterprise, the foundation on which an exchange can be built. But by definition, all stock exchange listed entities have to generate profits. So that means NGOs are ruled automatically in the current law structure. So if you're generating profit, whom does the profits go to? What kind of shares happen? Like for example, UK's laws are very clear. They have ceilings and all this. They're very clearly what happens, the entity closes down, what happens, the entity continues to perform, can they sell the entity to somebody else? There are restrictions. So we can put those restrictions, their entry restrictions, their exit restrictions. And those are all there. It's all proved around the world. Unless we get all that clear, and if you could get all that, by definition, a social stock exchange means that you have one entity, an entity for exchanges. Now, corporates, we can call them MSMEs, small scale sector, large corporate, but all of them have a corporate DNA in them. Let's not forget that. But you can't have a corporate DNA and an NGO DNA and say we'll have one body for them. It will not work. It might be dangerous. The first question, what is the first question, Basaraj, again? I'm sorry.
The first question was actually, so should we keep the profit, non-profit organization out of it?
I think we lose the game. Because as it is, the SEBI report is completely focused only on Section 8 companies. They think only Section 8 companies are for-profit and non-profit entities. I think that's a dangerous thinking. And there's a lot of change in the ecosystem. Like if the CSR amendment had gone through, NGOs, trust societies as we know them would have got virtually wiped out. Because only Section 8 companies could have been eligible for CSR grants. And if the SEBI is also saying social stock exchange only for Section 8 companies, we will lose the battle. I think we need to make our voices heard. We need to get a foot in the door. We have to sit at the table. And I believe people like Ravi who are in the Niti Aayog should raise this voice on all our behalf and say that we need discussions on this. NGOs may not be able to enter, but we need clear pathways for NGOs for survival, as well as if they want to enter, what is the transition phenomena. And they have to become a social enterprise before they actually get listed. So I think these definitions have to be done. I would say don't start the exchange before you're doing all this. And let's not say we'll start the exchange and find a way out. It's not going to happen. I'll give a small example. SEBI only talks about something called information repository. And I know a friend from Credibility Alliance is here. Credibility Alliance, Give India Foundation, or I think one more like that, or Murray Culture, I'm not sure. And then Niti Aayog's Darpan, they'll be the IRs. All of them put together cannot have this, they'll possibly have the same names repeating, not more than 80,000 or 90,000 NGOs which can function. What about the remaining ones? Such excellent work is happening by small NGOs. All of us know the migrant crisis would have exploded, would have amplified without NGOs, and many of them small ones. With their own limited ways they're operating. So we have a responsibility and obligation not to just take care of the large NGOs which will survive. We have to look at the small to medium-sized NGOs and allow them a growth plan. And therefore, I believe that unless you strengthen that, don't bring in a stock exchange. We are not ready for it. Do that. A stock exchange is very important. We have to have it. But when is the question? And I think when should be answered by we NGOs when we are ready for it and when we have capacity building for us. Though SEBI report talks about capacity building for us, I still believe there is no clear operational process because they don't even know how to operate a social stock exchange right now. Only after that you can define everything else. And that is where our voices need to be heard.
Thank you so much, sir. With that, you not only answered my question, a lot of other questions asked by the participants. So with this, we conclude the first part of our webinar. We are now getting into the discussion, the responses to the discussions. To moderate that, I request Mr. Ravi Pokharna to take over.